What is the quickest way you've seen someone give their life up? Story 1. This happened around 2006 to 2008. I can't remember exactly when because I was about 11 years old at the time. I had a friend in elementary and middle school who lived within 2 miles of me, with a CVS between our houses. She was 12, her little brother was 9, and their mother was around 40. They were at CVS picking up a few things and were walking to their car in the parking lot. As they were walking, the mother suddenly pushed both my friend and her brother away. My friend hit her head on the sidewalk and woke up to her brother screaming and crying. It turned out that a car was speeding while backing out of a parking spot, heading straight for them. The mother noticed this and pushed the kids out of harm's way. Sadly, the car pinned the mother against the CVS wall, and she passed away within minutes. The little brother witnessed everything and has since struggled with depression and PTSD. My friend suffered a concussion, lost her mother, and has never fully recovered. The driver wasn't under the influence. It was an elderly lady, around 80 years old, unfamiliar with the car, who accidentally pressed the gas pedal too hard. I'm not sure what happened when the police got involved, but my friend has been deeply affected ever since. Sometimes tragic events don't happen because of bad people, they just happen. Story 2. I once met one of the kindest people ever. He came from a prestigious, wealthy family, but was friends with everyone. He spent time with those who were often ignored, genuinely reaching out to anyone who felt lonely. He had no interest in high school politics. Meeting him even once left a significant impact on my life. He was fair and kind to everyone. Despite having everything, intelligence, good looks, and a rich family, he remained humble and peaceful. He truly embodied what it meant to be kind. A year after I met him, he went missing for 3 days. Eventually, it was discovered that he had attended a party the night he disappeared. He was supposed to be the designated driver, so it was strange that he left before everyone else. 3 days later, my brother found him in his pickup on an old logging road, tragically deceased. It was later revealed that he had taken psychedelic mushrooms, seeking a spiritual experience. His family found his Bible filled with highlighted passages about heaven and peace. The church he attended was more focused on status than genuine faith. At his funeral, the pastor controversially stated that he had committed a sin by taking his own life. Story 3. My college roommate had a motorcycle accident, slipping on wet leaves and hitting a curb. The bike flipped, striking his chest. When the police arrived, he seemed disoriented and bruised, but otherwise okay. They assumed he was intoxicated and took him in. In the holding cell, he complained about difficulty breathing. A nurse checked on him but found nothing alarming. Later, he collapsed, prompting officers to take him to the hospital. Unfortunately, he passed away en route, having suffered from a punctured lung. He was 23 years old, a hard-working senior at a respected college, and paid his own way. He was a good, empathetic person who had a bright future. As time passes, I don't miss him less. I just keep wondering who he would have become. As a parent now, I grieve for the children he never got to have, all because of a tragic sequence of events. Story 4. A friend of mine lost his kitchen job due to layoffs. Desperate for quick income, he found an ad for a driver delivery position. He called, got the job over the phone, and started the next evening. It turned out he was driving for an escort agency, picking up and dropping off workers. After a few nights, he started getting to know them, only to learn that they were all struggling with addiction. The worker suggested that he start his own operation, which he did within a week. He began paying the workers in drugs instead of cash, cutting out the middleman. His kitchen friends supplied him with cocaine, and he even searched online to learn how to make a derivative drug. Concerned about the quality, he tested it himself and ended up on a 36-hour binge. This led to him selling everything he owned within days. When I visited him about 10 days into this ordeal, he explained what had been happening and asked me to leave unless I wanted to engage in the new business he was running. Story 5. During a bachelor party in Las Vegas, we were doing a strip club tour. We always set a time to meet back at the limo before heading to the next club. One guy got very involved with the dancer and went into the VIP room. We waited an extra 30 minutes before leaving, after he waved us off. The next morning, he still hadn't returned to the hotel. We went back to the club where we found out he was being held by dancers for owing $9,000 in lap dances, having maxed out all his credit cards and withdrawn all his cash. That money was supposed to pay for his upcoming honeymoon. Story 6. I was the catcher for a kid in my town who was an impressive pitcher from a young age. At 16 or 17, he could throw 90 miles per hour fastballs and a variety of breaking pitches. It was tough to catch, so I had to keep a wet sponge in my mitt in case I caught one straight in the palm. He was drafted 12th overall by the Marlins and received a $1.8 million signing bonus before even attending spring training. Unfortunately, he ended up spending over $1.5 million on partying and drugs. His cocaine habit escalated to oxycodone and eventually heroin. He lost his ability to play, his position on the team, and his chance at earning millions more. It wasn't an overnight downfall, but within about 8 months, he wasted the signing bonus and lost everything he could have earned if he had stayed on track. Story 7. My ex-wife and I had 4 beautiful kids, 2 girls and twin boys. She had a decent job and an MBA with potential for a better career. After bariatric surgery, she became obsessed with the attention she got from losing weight on social media. She met someone through an online game and cheated. I tried to make it work, my mistake for not ending it sooner. But on another work trip, she met another man and fell in love while using drugs. She landed a surprisingly good job but got fired within 2 months for poor performance. She also tried to cash her paychecks twice on a couple of occasions. Now she's awaiting trial for 4 felonies, likely still using drugs, and has no custody rights since I refused to let the kids be around such a situation. She makes no effort to see them and blames everyone else for her issues. Story 8. I used to work at a small diner in Constance Bay, Ontario, about 10 years ago. A customer and her boyfriend were drinking at the local bar and made the responsible decision to leave their car behind and walk home. Constance Bay is a small town with a main road that loops around, featuring a sharp curve at one spot. While walking, they were struck by a drunk driver who had been cut off earlier at the local Legion. The impact threw them into a ditch. Her boyfriend died instantly, while she was severely injured, lying in the ditch for hours until someone noticed her hand sticking up. An ambulance was called, and she needed several surgeries, including the insertion of a metal rod in her leg. The drunk driver kept going, but then lost control at the sharp curve and crashed into a garage. Ironically, the garage belonged to the girl's parents. The driver was caught and charged, but his reckless decision not only affected his life, but also devastated the lives of the girl, her boyfriend, and their families. Story 9. There was a student we'll call Jerry who was well known at my school. He was known as the openly gay, friendly kid who excelled academically and was accepted to a prestigious college. Just a few weeks ago, Jerry went to a party and intentionally got a 17-year-old intoxicated until he passed out. Once the boy was unconscious, Jerry assaulted him and took compromising photos. The victim realized what had happened when he woke up, and the police were called immediately. The investigation revealed over 150 compromising photos of other minors on Jerry's phone, along with evidence from the party. At 18 years old, Jerry now faces serious charges, including assault of an unconscious victim, possession of inappropriate materials, and multiple other offenses. It's likely he will serve a minimum of 5 years in prison. Story 10. A man racked up $35,000 in credit card debt from online content subscriptions. To cover the interest, he borrowed money from a Chicago gang and took out a large life insurance policy on his wife, who was stationed in Iraq, hoping she wouldn't return. When she came back safe, he attempted to harm her, but she managed to escape. He was arrested, but due to family connections, some of the charges were reduced. He later threatened to harm her superiors, leading to military charges that could not be dismissed. While in custody, he boasted about sabotaging a ship compartment years ago, adding more charges to his record. He was dishonorably discharged and served 14 years in prison. He managed to cause all of this trouble within 4 months. Source: I am the ex-wife. Story 11. People from my high school who drove recklessly often ended up getting themselves killed. Some were intoxicated, but even when they were sober, they made poor decisions behind the wheel. One guy got impatient, tried to pass a car, and crashed head-on into oncoming traffic, resulting in his death. On the way to a senior skip day celebration, I struggled to keep up because everyone was driving 100 miles per hour in a 60 miles per hour zone. One girl got drunk and wrapped her car around a tree. Another guy fell out of a moving car because he was intoxicated and fooling around. Yet, every time people cried and asked, "Why do the good die young?" As if it wasn't bound to happen to someone else driving irresponsibly a few months later. Story 12. The fastest way I ruined my life was through drug use. I got into a serious car accident in 2014, had multiple surgeries, and spent 5 months in the hospital. Afterward, I became addicted to opiates, which eventually led to PTSD. I was prescribed a high dose of alprazolam, which blurred my memories for nearly a year. Somehow, I managed to stumble my way through college and am set to graduate this May. My GPA is low, so I'm not sure if I'll get into the nursing program at MUSC. I've been sober for a month, though the withdrawal felt like being tackled by a football team for the first 2 weeks. I spent most of that time in a fetal position, watching all 10 seasons of Cheers on Netflix and surviving on crackers and ginger ale. I'm still here somehow. Edit. Thank you all for the support. It really means a lot. It helps to know others have faced worse and found a way through. I also added a no opiate directive with my primary care doctor for safety. Edit 2. Thank you for the gold, kind stranger. I'll pass it on. Story 13. 4 of my close friends graduated high school at the same time. They all went to college, while I joined the Marine Corps. We were all nerds and familiar with MMOs and Blizzard games. World of Warcraft, WoW, had just become popular in 2006, but I couldn't play it due to my enlistment. Fast forward 8 years. I finished my service and went to college, where I graduated alongside 2 of those friends. One never returned to college, and another joined the Navy because he failed too many classes and couldn't manage his debt. The main culprit? Wow, they were playing 12 hours a day for years. All of them dropped out and had to rebuild their lives later. They're doing well now, but none of us will touch MMORPGs again. If you see your life spiraling because of an MMO, make changes. These guys lost 4 years over essentially nothing. Story 14. This story is unusual. A single dad ran a youth club, and while other staff tried to keep it quiet, the story quickly spread since his kids were part of the local social group. He was religious and very strict about his 15-year-old daughter not having a boyfriend. He never allowed boys over, even as friends. Naturally, she had a boyfriend who visited between school and when her dad got home from work. He suspected this but couldn't prove it. So he installed a webcam in her bedroom. He caught her having a private moment with her boyfriend and downloaded the footage to confront her. She immediately called her mother, who contacted the police. Social workers intervened, and he was charged with possession of illegal content. He is currently going through the court system, has been banned from the youth club, and hasn't seen his children for almost a year. He lost his kids, his job, his social circle, and the respect of the community, all due to a misguided attempt at parenting. Story 15. An ex-coworker of mine had a fairly average background, but managed to rise quickly in his career, going from an average income to $100,000 in about 3 years. He was frugal, had substantial savings, a nice apartment, a nice car, and a wonderful girlfriend. One day, I reached out to him but received no response. Months later, his girlfriend called and told me he was in jail but didn't say why. Eventually, I looked him up on the county court site and found out he was convicted of a serious crime involving a minor. He accepted a plea deal for a 14-year sentence to avoid a potential life sentence if found guilty at trial. He was about 30 years old at the time. He was very tech-savvy, always had the latest gadgets, and loved gaming. His girlfriend left him soon after, and his savings were depleted. He is now incarcerated 6 hours away from his family, and his mother has to make that long trip to visit him. I visited once, but decided it was too difficult to maintain a relationship with someone accused of such a terrible crime against a child. Story 16. I had a girlfriend that I really loved, and we were together for about a year and a half. She wanted to drop out of school, and I put a lot of pressure on her not to make that decision. One day, she left me and ran off with someone who was struggling with addiction. She ended up dropping out of school, became addicted to drugs, got pregnant, and got married, in that order. Eventually, she lost custody of her children to the state. Her life fell apart. There was a sense of satisfaction, especially since her mother strongly disliked me and tried to keep us apart, while I ended up succeeding in my career. Story 17. I met a friend while living in Shanghai, China. I was likely the first North American expat he encountered there. He was from Colorado and got wealthy quickly at a young age. I was 27, he was 23 with a fresh MBA, but he lacked financial discipline. However, he thought he knew it all. He secured a well-paying job managing small, highly automated plants that manufactured cell phone parts. His perks included a generous salary, danger pay twice a year, monthly trips to Hong Kong for cash, paid vacations, and a driver, along with a furnished apartment. He began spending time with 2 questionable individuals, an Australian and another American, who were known for their wild behavior. I warned him to stay away, as they were unpredictable. Unfortunately, he got into a fight with some locals over a girl at one of the expat bars. These locals rarely frequented those bars unless they had significant resources and connections. The fight resulted in one of the locals being hospitalized, and my friend and his companions were arrested. After significant negotiations involving many contacts, we managed to secure their release. Their visas were revoked, and they were ordered to leave the country. Story 18. I had been playing EverQuest for years, but eventually switched to World of Warcraft, WoW, during its open beta phase. My two friends and I started playing in high school. My friend Jay and I played casually, but our friend T needed guidance for even the basics of gameplay. We played together for a few weeks, but I was busy with swimming, while T, who lived with his grandmother due to his father's incarceration, had nothing else to focus on. He quickly surpassed us in the game, and it became an obsession. By senior year, with only a few months left until graduation, T dropped out of school. I only saw him once after that during a trip home from college. He was wearing the same hoodie he always wore, and he told me he was managing a fast food restaurant while trying to earn enough money to keep playing WoW. I felt incredibly guilty, as if I'd introduced him to a dangerous addiction. I walked him through the game and then left him to face the consequences alone. I still feel responsible for his situation. Story 19. A student from my school overdosed on heroin, but there's more to the story. I played baseball with him in middle school, and he was always part of the wrong crowd. But he was a genuinely good person and an exceptionally talented player. He received a few scholarship offers during his junior year, as he was always kind and supportive to others. However, he eventually got involved with harder substances and, unfortunately, heroin. He tried to turn his life around after dating a kind girl who was different from his usual friends. She helped him tremendously and was instrumental in his initial recovery. After returning from winter break, he got into a heated argument with a friend and relapsed, reaching out to his old dealer. The dealer then called the friend he had argued with and suggested giving him a dangerous batch of the drug. Shockingly, the friend agreed. Story 20. I've watched a few people from my school ruin their lives over the years. First, there was a guy from my street. On the day I got my driver's license, he asked if I wanted to hang out, but I had to decline because my mom insisted I look for a job to cover my expenses. He and two girls decided to race their cars on rough Oklahoma back roads. They hit gravel, lost control, crashed through a metal fence, and ended up suspended in trees. The girl in the back seat broke both wrists, the driver lost an arm, and my friend was killed instantly. His death devastated his family, particularly his mother, who attempted suicide multiple times and was never the same. The second person was a friend who started associating with a bad crowd after graduation. He quickly lost a lot of weight due to heavy drug use and now works low-paying jobs. He also lost many of his teeth and now wears dentures. He was a bright person with potential, but it was all wasted. The third was a socially awkward classmate who always seemed much older than he was. Some girls convinced him to ask a friend of mine to prom as a prank, only for her to laugh in his face. Years later, I found out he had been arrested for possessing inappropriate images, with evidence of multiple offenses involving minors from his church community. His case was settled recently, and he faces a long sentence, potentially until we're in our 50s. Story 21. Some people might not understand this, but drinking alone can be a slippery slope. At first, it's just a fun, occasional thing to do while watching a movie. Then, every time a new movie comes out, you drink to it. Soon you find yourself drinking every night, not because you want to, but because you feel like you need to. You start to become socially isolated, have less energy, and gain weight, which affects your relationships and increases your anxiety. Over time, life begins to feel like a strange, dreamlike loop, as the nights blend together after weeks of drinking. Story 22. In an effort to cut costs, the company hosted a Christmas luncheon in the boardroom. Various people received annual awards like large bottles of whiskey and vodka. About 30 people attended. Around 4 p.m., the manager left due to family commitments. Afterward, the bottles were opened. One married man overindulged, making inappropriate advances toward our staff lawyer, who was also married. We intervened as a group and escorted him to the elevator with taxi money. The lawyer, a kind woman, told us not to worry and brushed it off. We all agreed to let it go. However, by midweek, management began questioning what really happened. We found ourselves in trouble for not reporting the incident. It turned out the man hadn't taken a taxi. Instead, he tried to drive, crashing into parking curbs after failing to use his pass at the gate. He woke up in the drunk tank the next morning, having missed his family's flight to Disney. He lost his license, soon divorced his wife, apparently the last straw, lost his job, and eventually his house and dog went to his wife. Story 23. A friend of mine tragically shot and killed a cab driver. The story goes like this. He attended a party where his bag containing his keys and wallet was stolen. With no way to get home, he took a cab, agreeing to pay upon arrival. When they reached his destination, he realized he didn't have the money. In a terrible decision, he chose to take the driver's life. It's shocking, especially considering my friend's background. He was positive, academically accomplished, well-educated, had a supportive family and friends, and was successful in his career. It's unimaginable how he could see violence as a viable option. Story 24. In 2005, when I was 18, I ruined both my life and my brother-in-law's life by deciding to drive us home from a party while intoxicated. We were T-boned by a truck, and he died on impact. I survived, but everything fell apart. My sister lost her husband, my nephew lost his father, and I lost my best friend. I was prosecuted for vehicular homicide. Instead of accepting a full-ride scholarship to college, I went to prison. Instead of a six-figure office job, I ended up doing manual labor. I now struggle with alcoholism, depression, and PTSD. I had a sense of invincibility, believing I could live above the rules. It's hard to accept that I wasn't an exception to the rules, but rather a cautionary tale. While my life was shattered that night, I am still fortunate to have good days, or just days at all. My brother-in-law wasn't as lucky. While my life has suffered, his and his family's were ruined forever. Story 25. We had a decent marriage, no fights, good communication, bills paid, and I was happy to support her as a stay-at-home mom. But she became increasingly lazy, sleeping most of the day, and my patience was wearing thin. Instead of dealing with my nagging, she reconnected with an ex-boyfriend from high school and left me, taking $100K with her. The ex turned out to be a bad influence. She rented a large house, bought a boat and a new car, and spent her days drinking and using drugs. Within 5 months, she had spent the entire $100K, handed me full custody of the kids, and moved 45 minutes away to live with her new partner in poor conditions. One night, he mistook her for someone else and became violent when she refused his advances. He chased her with darts as she ran naked into the street. He drove off in her uninsured car and crashed it into a canal but survived. She eventually left him and is now with another unemployed man, who also left his pregnant partner for her. In the span of a year, she lost her marriage, kids, $100K, and a comfortable middle-class life, all because I wanted the house tidy when I came home. Story 26. I witnessed a good friend's life fall apart due to a mistake her then-husband made. We worked in the same office suite, and one day, I stopped by her desk to say hello. She mentioned that she couldn't reach her husband and was a bit worried. I tried to reassure her, suggesting that it might be another DUI. As I left for the day, I saw her in the foyer on the phone, looking alarmed. I mouthed, "Goodbye," and waved. As soon as I hit the stairs, I heard her scream, "What do you mean, solicitation of a minor?" I ran back to her and she was still in shock. I whispered that I would pick up my child, pack an overnight bag, and meet her at her house. When I arrived, she was sitting in the kitchen, tearful, with a glass of wine. We got our kids settled, and she explained what happened. Her husband had been caught in a sting operation, where he believed he was meeting a 15-year-old he had met online. The next day, I drove her to the city to post bail and pick him up from jail. When he saw me with his wife, his face was full of shame. I declined the ride back and waited for another friend to pick me up. They tried to make their marriage work but eventually divorced. It was surreal to witness. I still see his name pop up on offender watch lists. Story 27. My uncle, my mom's oldest brother, had a decent life working at a Caterpillar manufacturing plant until he was laid off during the recession. He turned to alcohol and cocaine, his wife left him, and he totaled his truck. Now he lives in a house my grandparents pay for, drives a car they bought him, and tries to get on disability. Any money he gets from my grandparents goes to guns, cigarettes, and his motorcycle. He took a $1,500 loan using his motorcycle as collateral, but gave the wrong address to the lender. My grandfather secretly paid off the loan and now holds the title. Rehab helped him overcome his cocaine addiction, but I still hold resentment toward him. He has drained my grandparents' finances, and their health has deteriorated over the past 8 years. He used to be a role model, but now he's my definition of rock bottom. Story 28. On my way to my birthday party, I stopped at an intersection near a highway access road. As the light turned green, I pulled forward but was T-boned by a driver running the red light. I calmly got out to help the drunk driver, but he hit me with his car and sped off. As I stood up, a police officer who was eating in a nearby church parking lot saw everything, turned on the sirens, and pursued the driver. The driver was charged with having a drunk minor in the car, hit and run, evading arrest, and negligence. Ironically, he was supposed to leave the country that weekend for a new job. I still made it to my birthday party. Story 29. I had a coworker I'd known for 20 years. He had been with our company for 17 years, and it was nearly impossible to get fired from there. He and his wife adopted a child since they couldn't have one naturally. His wife quit her job, which paid twice as much as his, to care for the child, leading to financial struggles. They eventually got involved with problematic neighbors and divorced. He struggled even more financially, rented a poor quality house, and got scammed by women he met online. He started drinking heavily, arriving late to work smelling of alcohol. He received his first DUI, continued driving without a license, and accumulated fines he couldn't afford. He met another woman online, married her quickly, but they separated soon after, adding to his issues. Last year, I got a call from his first ex-wife. He had another DUI, crashed his truck with his 6-year-old inside, and was arrested. He somehow avoided prison with a probation sentence, but continued drinking. He even posted photos of himself drinking at lunch. After sexually harassing a coworker, he was finally fired. Now he's broke, unemployed, and still in denial about his drinking. Story 30. I messed up my life badly with meth. It all started because my prescribed Adderall no longer worked. At first, I was able to manage a job and take care of my kids, thinking I was doing better as a mom because I kept the house clean and did fun things with them. However, a little turned into a gram a day, and 3 years later, I was homeless, jobless, and had lost custody of my kids to my parents. I got arrested, spent 4 months in jail, and now have 5 years of probation. I will owe about $16,000 by the end of it all. I'm now 34, living with my parents, and have little to show for my life. The bright side is that I've been 20 months clean, am living with my kids again, and am trying to rebuild. I use my mistakes as a lesson for my kids and hope they never end up in the same situation. Story 31. I knew this guy from high school who had a serious inferiority complex. His dad was a prominent figure, owned land up north, and the guy thought he owned everything. Fast forward a few years, his dad passes away, and he takes over the family business. He gets married but chooses the wrong woman. He was expected to marry one girl but impulsively chose another because he felt guilty after a fling. The jilted girl's father didn't react as expected. Instead, he hosted a lavish party, invited the guy and his new wife, and then things took a dark turn. The father orchestrated a violent act in front of everyone, while a dramatic song played in the background. Story 32. This happened last week. A girl I know who graduated last year, well known for being active in church, had a fallout with her mom. She then went on a live stream, clearly under the influence, engaging in inappropriate behavior. Some viewers tried to claim she was coerced, but she was speaking to the camera and making statements like, "I'm on Molly, Xanax, and other stuff. No one can tell me how to live." It was shocking and disturbing for everyone who knew her. Story 33. My best friend from childhood came from a tough background. His mom moved frequently, and he never had a stable home. He once confided in me about abuse, but I was too young to know how to help. Despite his challenges, he was brilliant and won a full scholarship to the same university I attended. Unfortunately, he had a terrible roommate who influenced him negatively, leading to substance abuse. By mid-year, he was on academic probation and dropped out soon after, returning home to his alcoholic mother. He later married someone equally troubled. Now he works part-time at a vet clinic and posts bizarre photos on social media, claiming to be at one with the fairy folk. His behavior has become erratic, and I often feel guilty for not helping him more when we were younger. Story 34. This wasn't my friend's fault, but his life changed drastically. In our freshman year of high school, he noticed emergency vehicles outside his house one morning. We later found out that his mom had overdosed and died. He lived in a rough neighborhood with his mom and stepdad. 3 months after his mom's death, his stepdad passed away from cancer. With no support from his biological father, who lived in another city, he became homeless. A friend's family, who were very religious, took him in. Despite his struggles, he was respectful, helped around the house, and even attended church, despite not believing in it. He battled an alcohol problem, but managed to graduate near the top of his class. got into a prestigious university, became a lawyer, and is now living a successful life. Story 35. I met a guy in college who had never tried marijuana. By the end of the semester, he started dealing. He got caught and expelled. A few months later, he was robbed, losing a backpack containing weed, money, and a handgun registered to him. He reported the stolen gun, but when the police caught the robbers, he was also arrested. Later, he got a new roommate who was under law enforcement surveillance. During a raid, the college guy was found with drugs and weapons, getting into even more trouble. Story 36. My uncle, now in his 60s, was looking forward to retiring from his career as an elite college football coach. He's always been one of those kind-hearted souls that everyone speaks well of. It wasn't unusual for him to let distant relatives stay at his home for a few days without hesitation. One day, he tried sexting his wife but didn't know how to do it correctly. The message was accidentally sent to everyone in his contacts list. This incident made the local news, which was unfortunate because he wasn't doing anything wrong, just trying something new with his wife. A few months later, at a social media presentation in my high school, 5 states away, the speaker used my uncle's story as an example of how one mistake can ruin a reputation. No one knew I was related to him, so I had to endure it quietly. I still hear about it from time to time, even though it happened 4 years ago. Unable to find work on the East Coast, he moved out west, and we haven't spoken since. Story 37. About 25 years ago, I worked at a TV station in New Mexico that employed a beloved meteorologist named Bill. He had been sober for 20 years, was around 50, and had a young wife, a new baby, and a job he loved. One night, we had a farewell party at a local bar, and since his family was out of town, Bill decided to make a brief appearance. For some reason, he decided to have a sip of beer. After that, he quickly lost control, grabbing drinks and gulping them down like a cartoon character. Despite attempts to stop him, he became increasingly intoxicated. Within 10 minutes, he ran out to his car, drove off, and rear-ended a car driven by a teenage girl. She sustained minor injuries, but Bill lost his job, became the center of attention in local news, lost his license, and his wife left him, all due to a 10-minute lapse after 2 decades of sobriety. He managed to rebuild his life somewhat, but he struggled with relapses until he passed away a couple of years ago. Addiction is truly ruthless. Story 38. My best friend has always had a gambling problem. He bets on sports and plays poker, and he's actually quite good at it, which only makes it harder for him to quit. He had a decent life, a job, and a sweet girlfriend. He would win about $10,000 a few times a year in poker and smaller amounts from sports betting. The downside was that he would lose his winnings within days. One year, just before Christmas, he messaged me in the middle of the night saying, "Dude, I just won $10K on poker." I advised him to withdraw 90% and keep $1,000 to play with. The next morning, I woke up to another message. He had made a big mistake. He spent around $6,000 on his girlfriend's credit card, intending to pay it back the next day with his winnings. However, he placed all the money on what he thought were safe bets and lost everything. From that point on, everything fell apart. He lost his girlfriend, became homeless, lost his job, and turned to drugs. He stayed with me a lot, but there was only so much I could do without giving him money, which he would lose anyway. The good news is that he's now recovering. He hasn't gambled in over a year, has stayed off drugs for several months, and is slowly getting back on his feet. But that one bad decision cost him many years of his life. Story 39. My sister and I were never close, mainly due to our age difference, but I idolized her when I was younger. She was a talented dancer, a model, and a manager at a makeup store. She even did makeup for celebrities and dated a few of them. Then she met a woman from a wealthy Middle Eastern family. This woman introduced my sister to high-quality cocaine. Over time, my sister's looks deteriorated. She gained weight, stopped dancing, and her career fell apart. She claimed she became romantically involved with the woman just to keep accessing the drugs. My sister turned hostile, trying to ruin our lives any chance she got. She physically attacked me multiple times, breaking my nose once, and even threatened to burn me alive while I slept. Being much younger, I hid the truth from my parents. Eventually, I couldn't handle it anymore. I was failing in school from sleep deprivation, fearing her threats, so I finally told my parents. I found some drugs in the house, handed them to my mom, and she called my dad. He flushed the drugs and then packed up my sister's belongings, throwing them out. When my sister came home, she denied everything, then lashed out, blaming me and our parents. She left after a heated argument. Years later, she got clean, found religion, got married, and had kids. Now she's critical of people without money and makes her children pray to political figures as if they were divine. I haven't spoken to her in 12 years. She's the reason for my low self-esteem, strained friendships with women, and anxiety whenever her name is mentioned. I've succeeded in life, but I still wish I had a real sister and that I had spoken up sooner. Story 40. In 2011, my brother, a novice motorcyclist, was riding through a four-way intersection with a green light in his favor. A driver in a truck decided not to wait and turned in front of him, causing my brother to crash into the metal tray of the vehicle. He didn't die instantly, but didn't suffer long either. After a year of court proceedings, the driver received an $1,100 fine, a 12-month license suspension, and an 18-month good behavior bond. He even tried to shake my father's hand as he left the courtroom smiling. My brother's death made front-page news and was widely discussed in our town for weeks. 5 years later, my family is shattered. My parents couldn't cope, especially my father. I've moved to a new town and recently quit drinking as a coping mechanism. My sister has also been through a lot, but that's another long story. Story 41. My adopted brother had the talent to secure a basketball scholarship at any college, but ended up serving a 10-year prison sentence for armed robbery. He was my brother's best friend in high school and came from a broken home. We adopted him, and he quickly excelled in basketball, standing at 6'9". He practiced relentlessly, sinking 40-plus foot shots regularly. In his senior year, college scouts noticed him, and it felt like a blindside type story was unfolding. Unfortunately, he got involved with the wrong crowd. His girlfriend became pregnant, miscarried, then broke up with him. He turned to drugs, and the downward spiral continued. He was caught attempting a robbery one night and was sentenced to 10 years. He still has 4 years left. I hate the choices he made because I was rooting for him so much. Kids, keep your focus on your goals and avoid bad influences. Story 42. There was a girl I'd known since the 4th grade who was really bright, popular, and genuinely kind. We went to different high schools, but she eventually transferred and ended up in my history class. The same thing happened in college. She showed up in my English class. She even started working at my favorite record store. It seemed like I was always bumping into her. She was always nice to me, even helping me find a part-time job and assisting with my homework. We'd talk about metal bands when I had no one else to share that interest with. One day, while I was with my art group in college, we got the news that a student had passed away over the weekend. When her name was read aloud, I was in shock. She had been celebrating her 18th birthday and decided to try ecstasy for the first time. She felt unwell, went to bed, and was found dead the next day. I'm not sure if it was due to brain swelling or choking, but it was devastating. It's been 10 years since she passed, and I was just thinking about her a few days before the anniversary. She had so much potential, and I bet there are still people who think she's achieved great things, not realizing she's gone. It's strange to think that she could be turning 30, maybe married, or have a career by now. It's hard to imagine someone I grew up with missing out on the experiences I've had. All of this happened because of one bad pill. I've never used drugs, not even marijuana, and I've always been against them. My memory of her is a constant reminder to stay away. Story 43. My coworker and I were catching up on work over the weekend when the office was usually closed. We typically worked 9, 5, but that day we stayed until 8. While working, she spoke about her son who was recovering from drug addiction and had been trying to stay clean. She mentioned finding her son unconscious after using heroin about a week before, but said he'd been off the drugs for the last 5 days. I had a bad feeling and warned her to learn about how to handle an overdose if it happened again. She promised to look into local programs. When she got home at 8:20 that night, she found her son unresponsive in the bathroom. He had overdosed and passed away that night. Story 44. My dad struggled with substance use for most of his life, mainly alcohol, marijuana, and some recreational drugs. Around the age of 50, he started transitioning and got involved with a group of drug-using trans people who were addicted to meth. Within a year, he lost 50 pounds, his job as a school psychologist, and became convinced that he was being monitored by the FBI. A SWAT team eventually had to remove him from his home and place him in detox for 3 months. The state later found him mentally ill and chemically dependent. He cashed in his retirement early, living off it out of desperation, and is now on the verge of bankruptcy with no clear career path ahead. I still love him and we have dinner together every week, but meth has ruined his life. I've tried to prepare myself mentally for the inevitable call from the coroner's office. Addiction is devastating, and meth is especially harmful. Never try it, and if you know someone who does, try to help them, but understand that there's a limit to what you can do if they aren't willing to change. Sometimes facing the consequences is the only way forward. Story 45. I knew this kid named Sean who was incredibly intelligent, funny, and outgoing, a rare combination. He maintained straight A's throughout school, was good-looking, and girls were always approaching him. I always thought, I wonder what Sean will do when he gets older, because he seemed capable of achieving anything. He started his own computer repair business at 16, and by 17, he was working for a larger operation that even provided him with a company car. After graduating high school, Sean got into trouble. He started engaging in petty theft, mischief, and eventually moved on to heavier drug use. Initially, it was just lower-tier substances, but he eventually became dependent on heroin. He began dealing to support his habit, using connections with people linked to cartel members. One day, he sold 7 grams to a customer who turned out to be an undercover cop, leading to a 2-year prison sentence. While in prison, he learned nothing but more criminal behavior. After serving his time, he was released but wasn't the same person anymore. His humor was gone, and he became aggressive. 2 years later, Sean was doing meth and associating with dangerous individuals. He got arrested for grand theft auto after stealing an RV and trying to evade a U.S. Marshal. He was sentenced to 10 years but was released after 3 due to good behavior and prison overcrowding. Now he's involved with a notorious criminal organization. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up back in prison, this time for a longer stay. Sean had so much potential, but he threw it all away. Story 46. My ex-girlfriend and I dated for almost 3 years before breaking up over her increasingly strange behavior. I tried to get her help, but she accused me of being the one who needed help. She told me she didn't love me, and we ended things. About 4 months later, she ended up in a group home to escape her abusive, alcoholic mother. She called me a week after moving in, sounding hyperactive and asking me to take her back, saying everything would be better, especially if she had Molly to use. But she wasn't using Molly, she was using cocaine. Within another month, she was kicked out of the group home, addicted to crack, and selling herself to fund her addiction. She then moved in with a dealer who exploited her addiction. Eventually, she left to live with her estranged father, who became her new source of drugs. Disturbingly, she started having an inappropriate relationship with her biological father in exchange for drugs and shelter. He even took over her social media accounts, detailing their relationship publicly, drawing a lot of attention. The last photo I saw of her showed her with hollow eyes, a fake smile, and her father next to her, flipping off the camera. She went from a comfortable suburban life to a tragic and exploitative existence. Story 47. In high school, I was in a band with a talented guitarist who could play solos from Hendrix to Stevie Ray Vaughan. His parents supported his passion by buying him around $20,000 worth of equipment. He was a straight A student and never even drank alcohol. He also had a dirt bike and a lifted Chevy Blazer. During our senior year, he decided to try alcohol at one of our weekend parties. His parents often went to their beach house, leaving the perfect hangout spot with stocked drinks and snacks. We'd drink, play video games, and make music. Unfortunately, he had an addictive personality. Not long after trying alcohol, he started using pills, which escalated into cocaine and heavy drinking within a year. He pushed away everyone who cared about him, and his new friends only stuck around for the drugs. Things took a turn when he had a breakdown, attacked his mom, shot up the house with his dad's shotgun, and contemplated ending his life before simply going back to bed. The cops were called, guns were removed, and he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which he refused to accept or treat. That was 10 years ago. Last I heard, he was in and out of rehab living with his grandmother. It was my harsh introduction to how manipulative and deceptive addiction can be. Story 48. My aunt embezzled money from her own family business, and when she was about to be caught, she attempted suicide by jumping off a parking structure. She survived, but nearly every bone in the lower half of her body was broken. The incident strained her family emotionally and financially. Her husband's insurance fortunately covered nearly $1 million in surgeries and life-saving treatments. Her children were told she had an accident, not the truth. Her only son became dependent on medication prescribed to cope with the trauma of nearly losing his mother. Less than 2 years later, he passed away. The official story was that he got sick, but I suspect he overdosed on the heavy medications he was given. While my aunt escaped both prison and death, she ultimately paid the price with her son's life and is now confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Story 49. There was a highly intelligent girl whose father was a wealthy lawyer. She attended a competitive high school and was in the running for valedictorian, even getting featured in the local paper. She was offered a full scholarship to Harvard, but she wanted to secure the top position at any cost. Her father allegedly used his connections to have her classified with a disability, which exempted her from gym class. This allowed her to take an extra advanced placement, AP class, giving her more credits than the other valedictorian candidate. The principal decided to make them co-valedictorians, considering it unfair to the other student. The girl's father sued, and the school eventually conceded, making her the sole valedictorian. During her graduation speech, the entire assembly stood and turned their backs on her. It made headlines, and the media uncovered that some of her articles in the local paper were plagiarized. Harvard rescinded her acceptance and scholarship after discovering academic dishonesty. Story 50. Heroin is the worst way someone can ruin their life, and my younger sister fell victim to it. She started smoking it almost 2 years ago but got clean when she found out she was pregnant. She had a beautiful baby boy and was doing well for a while. However, she relapsed and quickly switched to injecting, despite having support from social workers and family. Her son was taken from her, and she was given 3 more chances over the past year. I offered help, but it was only accepted when I gave her money or other resources. Last week, I got a message saying she had overdosed and was resuscitated. She was admitted to a mental hospital, and I thought she might finally get help. I called the nurses to share her messages about suicidal thoughts, but they dismissed my concerns. Later, she messaged me from a borrowed phone, asking for a cheap pay-as-you-go phone. I bought supplies for her hospital stay, but when I delivered them, she seemed fixated on getting the phone working, likely trying to score drugs. A few days later, I received another message from her, claiming she hadn't eaten and needed money. I knew it was a lie and offered her food bank details instead. She became hostile, threatening to turn to prostitution and blaming me. We had very different upbringings. I was raised by our grandmother while she lived with our neglectful mother. My sister was aware of the damage heroin can cause, as our uncle was both a dealer and an addict. I've seen addiction firsthand and won't enable her behavior. I've accepted that one day I might get a call saying she's gone, and there's nothing I can do because she doesn't truly want help. Story 51. This guy I used to know, we went to high school together, and he was a couple of years older than me. He was really into cycling and would participate in every cycling event in the area. I was sure he was going places, as I had never seen anyone as passionate as he was. This was back in the early days of League of Legends, when it was just becoming popular. Since we were good friends, he invited me to play with him. I played occasionally, as it wasn't really my type of game, but he got hooked. Fast forward 2 years, and he became addicted to the game. He convinced himself he was going to become a professional esports player and started training constantly, which led to him missing school and losing sleep. He ignored everyone's advice to step back from the game, and it began to affect him negatively. He became aggressive and started snapping at people. He also stopped attending cycling events, becoming unfit in the process. By the end of high school, he dropped out and had a serious argument with his guardian, allegedly to the point where they stopped speaking to each other. At this point, I lost regular contact with him as I moved on to further education, but he still messaged me occasionally on Skype. After a long period of silence, he messaged me saying he was about to join a professional team but needed money for a flight to meet their coach. He hoped I could help, but I was still a student and had no money to offer. When I told him, he cursed me out, saying I wasn't a good friend. After that, we lost contact completely. Recently, I found his social media and managed to contact his guardian to find out what happened next. He never flew out to meet the team, and the team, it turned out, never contacted him in the first place. After another major argument with his guardian, he moved across the country to live with his father. His father was strict and had no internet at home since he was always at work. This situation deeply affected my friend, who had been playing the game almost nonstop. Without internet access, he began to show signs of major depression. Eventually, his father got him a job at his construction company, and things seemed to improve. But the father noticed that his son would disappear for a few hours each day. It wasn't a concern until he received a call from the hospital saying his son had been severely injured after colliding with a car on a bicycle while intoxicated. This was strange since the guy didn't own a bicycle. It turned out he had secretly bought a bicycle with the money he earned, hoping to get back into cycling. Unfortunately, he's now in a wheelchair and may never walk or cycle again. It's heartbreaking because he had so much potential when we were younger. I tried reaching out to him, but he never responded, so I assume he's forgotten about me. His story, however, will always stay with me as a reminder that he may never experience life to the fullest. Story 52. My girlfriend's old roommates. Last semester was our first year in college, and everything was going well. My girlfriend's roommate, let's call her Lucy, was a nice person, good student, and responsible. She had a dedicated boyfriend in the Army ROTC program. He was a bit religious, but not in an overbearing way. We all got along well, none of us drank, used drugs, and we were all focused on our studies. One weekend, her boyfriend had an ROTC event a few towns over, leaving Lucy alone. One of her friends convinced her to go to a party where she got very drunk and ended up with another guy. The next time she saw her boyfriend, she confessed and broke up with him. The following weekend, the same pattern repeated. She drank too much and hooked up with another guy. This continued almost every weekend for the rest of the semester. One day, a guy in our friend group, Richard, asked my girlfriend if Lucy was ready for a relationship. She said no, but Richard later got Lucy drunk by secretly adding more alcohol to her drink and then separated her from the group. We eventually found her, got her to bed, and left. Later that night, Richard returned to Lucy's room, and they ended up together. A few days later, they started dating. Over the next 2 months, they broke up and got back together about 8 times. During this period, Lucy cheated on him once after getting drunk, and Richard also cheated multiple times. Lucy's behavior worsened. She started using cocaine, as her boyfriend was a dealer, and she began skipping almost all her classes. My girlfriend decided to move out when drugs started appearing in the room daily. Lucy's downward spiral continued. She stopped attending classes, received 5 minor in possession, MIP charges, lost her financial aid, had to take weekly drug tests, pay thousands in fines, and blame my girlfriend for reporting the situation to the resident advisor, RA, out of concern. To make things worse, Richard was cheating on Lucy again with someone just a few doors down from my girlfriend. Story 53. When I went to college, I lived in a party town off campus. During my senior year, we met a new friend in the neighborhood. He partied with us all semester and was at our house every day. He was an African immigrant, and his perspective on things was always funny, making him fit right in with our group. He had been staying with a childhood friend down the street, sleeping on the couch, and was eager to find a room to rent. In the second semester, a room became available in our house. He moved in, but soon started using prescription painkillers like roxicodone. I never got into painkillers myself, as I was already overindulging in alcohol and pot, but painkillers were everywhere at the time. 2 weeks after he moved in, he was late for work, so a coworker came by the house to wake him up. That's when we found him dead in his room. He had only been away from his childhood friend's place for 2 weeks. It turned out that his friend had been keeping him on track, but without that support, he quickly fell into addiction. I still think about him and the people who introduced him to roxicodone. I think about the dealer who saw how impaired he was that night, but still sold him Xanax. The combination of roxicodone, 6 beers, and a Xanax is all it took. I went from having a good friend move in to having to explain to his parents, who had flown in from Africa, why their son was taking medication despite being in good health. They couldn't understand, and it was a devastating conversation. Story 54. One guy that works with my mom has a serious drug problem. He was arrested about 6 years ago for robbery in a particularly foolish manner. His partner was caught, and he parked the stolen car with all the stolen goods inside right outside the police station to wait for his partner's release. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released after 2 years on probation. He stayed clean until the last week of his probation, when he relapsed and went back to jail for a year. After that, he was placed on work release for a year or two, but he managed to get drugs again, resulting in another full year in prison. He was released on probation once more about a year ago, but again he relapsed in the final week. Now, he's on house arrest for the foreseeable future. Another person who frequented my mom's workplace, a flea market, was a nurse working at a federal prison with great pay and benefits. Her boyfriend of 2 months got arrested and sent to the same prison, which was a conflict of interest for her. Instead of continuing her job, she got engaged to him and quit. Last I heard, she was homeless. While not a quick downfall, there was a little corner store in my neighborhood notorious for its trashy reputation. Many of the customers were on food stamps or disability, often because they simply didn't want to work. Some of the employees were the same. One worker in particular had been there for 15 years and convinced the owner that she was the only one keeping the store running, which allowed her to get away with various shady practices such as no change days. On some days, customers couldn't get change, no matter the cost of their purchases or what they paid with. Food stamp fraud. She would pay with her food stamps for customers who paid in cash, pocketing the difference to buy alcohol. This eventually led to her arrest, asking customers for money just because she wanted it, violating numerous health codes, and more. My mom also had her own financial struggle with a car title loan. It's a system where you borrow $800, but immediately owe $2,000 in debt. The monthly payments are around $400 just to cover most of the interest, leaving you with a $3,000 debt by the end of the year. Then, they demand $750 monthly payments to make a slight dent in the balance or threaten to take your car. One last story, though I didn't witness it myself. At my high school, the year before I started, someone called in a bomb threat to avoid taking a test. They were promptly arrested. Story 55. My friend's younger brother used to live in the apartment next door to me, and we worked at the same company, different departments. He had a pretty good job as a senior Windows support technician, making about $60-70K a year. Despite having a decent career, he wasn't the sharpest. He sensed he might get fired, but instead of trying to improve his performance, find a new job in advance, or even wait to be let go so he could collect unemployment, he simply took a lunch break one day and never came back. That same week, he moved out of his apartment and into his girlfriend's mom's house, even though he had 10 months left on his lease. He also left behind significant damages in the apartment. I'm not sure of all the details, but I heard the landlord had to replace the entire bathtub and hire an electrician to fix or certify the electrical work the brother had done himself. With no goodwill left, the landlord kept his security deposit and took him to court over the remaining rent. The court ruled that he was liable for all unpaid rent while the apartment was being repaired and unoccupied, provided the landlord was actively seeking a new tenant. By this point, the only job he managed to secure was at Staples, making minimum wage, which led him to file for bankruptcy. He and his girlfriend eventually moved in with his family in rural Pennsylvania. Now he works as a short-order cook, while his girlfriend works part-time at a retail store. Story 56. A girl I know was really pretty and fairly intelligent. She went to a good school, traveled and studied abroad, and generally lived a good life. She met a guy in college, fell in love, and married him at a relatively young age, probably around 24 or 25. She's about 28 or 29 now. Things seemed to be going well for her until her mother passed away, which had a devastating effect. Soon after, her marriage started to unravel. She became very vocal about her struggles on social media, accusing her husband of cheating or leaving her for someone else. Then, she started using what seemed to be meth or heroin, and her life spiraled downward quickly. She eventually separated from her husband, and her appearance deteriorated to the point where she could have been featured on a Faces of Meth poster. More recently, she appears to have improved physically, based on the few photos she posts on social media. However, she's also made bizarre claims about aliens coming into her home at night to attack her, sharing photos of scratches and bruises as evidence. Her social media is filled with posts about aliens, often shared in the middle of the night, along with rants about how people are ignorant of their existence. I haven't seen any posts from her in a while, and I sometimes worry that she might no longer be alive. I feel conflicted about being connected with her on social media because many of the responses to her posts are negative or bullying. But deep down, I hope to see her turn her life around someday. Sadly, she's a wreck, and I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't make it to her mid-30s.